Russia has officially stepped into what many economists are calling its Black November, a moment when budgets are strained to the breaking point, money printing is accelerating, and the Kremlin is quietly confronting a question it has avoided for nearly 2 years: what happens when the cash simply runs out? In this week's economic review, we dig beneath the surface of official numbers, government statements, and central bank releases to uncover what is really happening inside Russia's financial system, why the alarm bells are ringing, and what this means for ordinary citizens trying to survive rising prices, shrinking incomes, and a state that is running out of ways to hide the truth. Russia's financial position has been deteriorating for months, but November has exposed the scale of the problem in a way that even government propaganda can no longer fully mask. At the center of the storm is the federal budget. Russia's spending obligations have exploded, driven by military costs, social assistance payments, regional bailouts, and emergency subsidies designed to keep key industries from collapsing. The result is a deficit far larger than what was initially projected, and certainly much larger than what Moscow wants the world to believe. Officials claim that everything is under control, but internal reports suggest that fiscal pressure has reached a point where the government has begun quietly raiding every possible source of cash: reserves, rainy day funds, business profits, pension assets, and even quasi-taxes disguised as one-time contributions. These hidden revenue grabs signal desperation rather than confidence. The simplest way to understand the crisis is this: Russia is spending money faster than it can earn it. Oil and gas revenues, the backbone of the federal budget, have become volatile and unpredictable. Discounts on Russian oil remain steep. Pipeline exports to Europe are a fraction of what they used to be. Logistics costs have surged. Sanctions and shipping risks cut into profits. Meanwhile, military expenditures have reached historic levels, consuming not only the money originally allocated to the defense ministry but also funds pulled from dozens of civilian programs. Housing, healthcare, education, infrastructure development, science funding, cultural programs, many of these have been trimmed, delayed, or quietly cancelled. But even with these cuts, the deficit continues to grow. To fill the gap, the Kremlin has turned to the printing press. The central bank has been pumping rubles into the system at a pace that economic analysts describe as overheating. The money supply has expanded at double-digit rates, far exceeding the growth of the real economy. This kind of monetary injection can temporarily mask financial pressure, but it comes at a steep cost: inflation. That inflation is now visible everywhere. Prices for groceries, utilities, household goods, construction materials, electronics, transportation, and basic services have all climbed faster than official statistics admit. Independent analysts estimate real inflation is significantly higher than the headline figure released by Rosstat. For ordinary Russians, this is where the crisis becomes real. It's not just an abstract discussion of deficits and reserves. It's the moment when your salary buys less, when your grocery bill jumps every month, when the cost of repairing your car or buying a winter jacket becomes a major burden. It's the moment when businesses raise prices not because they want higher profits, but because they cannot survive without doing so. Small and medium-sized enterprises across the country report shrinking margins, higher credit costs, and fewer customers with disposable income. People are cutting spending wherever they can. Restaurants are emptier. Retail stores are losing foot traffic. Even pharmacies report customers choosing cheaper alternatives or buying smaller quantities. Meanwhile, regional governments, already some of the most financially fragile parts of Russia's system, are facing their worst budget crisis in years. Many have seen their tax revenues decline while their social spending obligations increase. To avoid bankruptcy, they are borrowing more heavily, but that borrowing ultimately depends on federal guarantees. Several regions are now effectively dependent on monthly transfers from Moscow. As the federal budget tightens, these transfers become riskier, creating growing instability across the country. Some governors have reportedly warned Moscow that without additional support, they may not be able to meet basic obligations like salaries for public workers, utility payments, or winter heating contracts. One of the most telling signs of strain is the Kremlin's recent pattern of special levies on large companies. These are not presented as taxes. Instead, they are framed as patriotic contributions or temporary adjustments. But businesses understand the truth. When the state informally demands money, you pay, or you face regulatory pressure, tax inspections, or worse. The problem is that this approach is not sustainable. You can only squeeze companies so many times before they reduce investment, slow production, or shift money abroad. Some already are. Capital outflow from Russia remains extremely high, even under strict currency controls. Wealthy Russians are moving assets into foreign accounts, offshore structures, or physical goods like gold and real estate outside the country. The pressure on the ruble remains intense despite interventions. The central bank has raised interest rates to fight inflation and support the currency, but higher rates also choke business activity and make loans impossible for many families. Mortgage payments have become a nightmare for those with variable rate contracts. Car loans have become prohibitively expensive. Young families looking to buy homes are being pushed out of the market. The state has introduced subsidies to soften the blow, but those subsidies themselves require more money, feeding back into the budget crisis. Behind closed doors, officials reportedly debate how long this can continue. Russia still has reserves, but the most accessible ones have already been used. What remains is harder to convert, politically sensitive, or strategically problematic. The Kremlin's strategy, for now, is to stretch every remaining ruble as far as possible, hoping that oil prices rise or global conditions shift in their favor. But hope is not a policy. And the forces driving this crisis, war spending, sanctions, capital flight, inflation, shrinking labor force, are structural, not temporary. The labor shortage is particularly severe. Conscription, emigration, and demographic decline have created a workforce gap that affects everything from agriculture and construction to logistics and high-tech industries. Businesses are paying more to attract workers, which adds to inflation. Productivity falls when skilled workers leave or are drafted. Entire sectors become slower, less efficient, and more dependent on state contracts. In many regions, the private sector now survives primarily on government spending. Remove that, and thousands of businesses would collapse. This is the hidden danger that many analysts focus on. The Russian economy is becoming increasingly militarized and centralized. The war economy model can produce short-term growth, especially when measured by outdated metrics like industrial output. But it is inherently unsustainable because it destroys long-term economic foundations, innovation, private enterprise, foreign investment, consumer confidence, trade networks, and human capital. An economy built around state orders and emergency measures may look active, but it is brittle. One shock, one policy mistake, or one external disruption can trigger cascading failures. Inside Russia, people feel this in daily life. Complaints about prices are everywhere, even though few dare link them openly to government policy. Lines for subsidized goods in some regions resemble the early 1990s. Car parts and appliances are often of lower quality due to parallel imports. Insurance costs have risen sharply. Travel has become more expensive. Savings accounts lose value because inflation outruns deposit rates. The middle class, once the symbol of Russia's economic progress, is shrinking and becoming poorer. Despite all this, the Kremlin continues to insist the economy is stable. Official briefings highlight selective statistics: rising industrial output, growing employment numbers, strong construction figures. But even these indicators reveal deeper problems. Industrial output is rising because of military production, not civilian demand. Employment numbers are high because labor shortages force companies to hire anyone they can find, not because new opportunities are being created. Construction is booming only because of state-funded projects designed to keep certain industries alive. So the question remains, how long can the Kremlin keep this going? The answer depends on several variables: oil prices, sanctions enforcement, foreign trade routes, military spending levels, and the internal political cost of tightening budgets further. But the key point is this: Russia's current economic model is burning cash at an unsustainable rate. Each month requires more interventions, more hidden taxes, more printed money, and more emergency fixes. The system can stretch, bend, and adapt, but it cannot escape basic economic laws forever. At some point, the combination of inflation, budget deficits, regional instability, capital outflow, and falling living standards will force a reckoning. It may not be sudden. It may not look like a dramatic collapse. More likely, it will be a slow erosion, a grinding decline that quietly reduces opportunities, lowers incomes, and increases the gap between official propaganda and reality. For millions of ordinary Russians, that reality is already here. The purpose of this analysis is not to attack or target any individual. It is to explain, based on publicly available data from the Finance Ministry, the Central Bank, Rosstat, and business reporting, where the Russian economy is truly heading and why this moment matters. Understanding these trends is essential, not only for economists and analysts, but for anyone who wants to grasp how domestic policy, global markets, and ordinary people's lives intersect in a moment of profound uncertainty. If you want to follow the full story, track these indicators every month, and see how long this financial balancing act can continue, watch this episode to the end, hit like, and share it with someone who wants real, sourced, and responsible analysis, not propaganda, not fear-mongering, but clear insight into the numbers shaping everyday life in Russia today.